I almost had a heart attack because the idea of not being able to protect our love from outside influences consumed me. The thought of losing what we have was too terrifying to bear. I almost had a heart attack because I was overwhelmed by the thought that I may have taken you for granted. The fear of realizing this too late left my heart racing with regret. I almost had a heart attack because the intensity of my longing for you became too much to ignore. The realization that I need you more than I ever thought possible left me breathless. I almost had a heart attack because the thought of you slipping away, slowly and silently, was a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I can't bear the thought of losing you without a fight. I almost had a heart attack because the truth about my feelings hit me like a tidal wave. The overwhelming realization that I can't imagine my life without you left me shaken to my core. I almost had a heart attack because I finally understood how fragile love can be. The fear of not nurturing it enough to survive life's storms was a heavy burden on my heart. I almost had a heart attack because I realized that I've never been this vulnerable with anyone before. The depth of what I feel for you scares me, and the thought of losing you terrifies me even more. I almost had a heart attack because I envisioned a future where we drifted apart. The mere thought of that future was enough to make my heart stop, as I can't imagine my world without you in it. I almost had a heart attack because I suddenly feared that I might not be enough for you. The panic of wondering if I could lose you to someone else made my heart race uncontrollably. I almost had a heart attack because the thought of never being able to hold you close again overwhelmed me. The fear of that emptiness without your presence was more than I could bear. I almost had a heart attack because the weight of my own insecurities became too much to handle. The fear of not being able to live up to your expectations was overwhelming. I almost had a heart attack because the thought of you not needing me anymore struck me like lightning. The idea that you could move on without me was a nightmare I couldn't escape. I almost had a heart attack because I realized that I might not have told you enough just how much you mean to me. The fear of losing you without ever fully expressing my love was unbearable. I almost had a heart attack because the gravity of my feelings for you hit me with such force that I didn't know how to breathe. The intensity of it all was both beautiful and terrifying. I almost had a heart attack because I was struck with the possibility that we may never get the chance to experience everything we've dreamed of together. The fear of time slipping away haunted me. I almost had a heart attack because I saw you in a moment of doubt, and I feared that I might not be enough to chase those doubts away. The pressure of wanting to be your everything was overwhelming. I almost had a heart attack because I thought for a brief moment that I had lost you forever. The sheer panic of imagining life without you made my heart race with fear and desperation. I almost had a heart attack because I realized how easily things could fall apart between us. The fragility of our connection, combined with the weight of my feelings, was enough to leave me breathless. I almost had a heart attack because the thought of living without your love became too painful to consider. The idea of being without you filled me with dread that I couldn't shake off. I almost had a heart attack because the intensity of my love for you hit me like a storm. It was so powerful, so consuming, that it felt like my heart couldn't contain it all at once. I almost had a heart attack because I feared that I might never be able to show you how deeply I feel. The thought of you not knowing the extent of my love was more than my heart could handle. I almost had a heart attack because I suddenly realized how easily everything could change. The unpredictability of life scared me, and the fear of losing you to it was overwhelming. I almost had a heart attack because I saw the future we've dreamed about, and the fear of not reaching it together took my breath away. The thought of not making it there with you was terrifying. I almost had a heart attack because the realization of how fragile love is hit me all at once. The fear of not being able to protect our love from the challenges of life made my heart race. I almost had a heart attack because I feared that I had waited too long to show you how much you mean to me. The thought of time slipping away, of missed opportunities, was suffocating. I almost had a heart attack because I realized how much I have come to rely on you, and the idea of that comfort being taken away was overwhelming. You are my safe space, and the fear of losing that was too much. I almost had a heart attack because I realized how fleeting our moments together are. Every second felt like a lifetime, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing it all in the blink of an eye. I almost had a heart attack because your absence was like a void that consumed every corner of my heart. The sheer panic of not knowing when I'd see you again was overwhelming. I almost had a heart attack because the weight of my own mistakes and regrets hit me all at once. The thought of not being able to make things right with you was paralyzing. I almost had a heart attack because the reality of how much you mean to me suddenly hit me with full force. The fear of never being able to express my feelings fully left me breathless. I almost had a heart attack because I saw a future without you, and the very thought of it made my heart race uncontrollably. You are my anchor, and the idea of drifting away was terrifying. I almost had a heart attack because the truth of how deeply I am in love with you became clear. The realization that my feelings were more intense than I had ever imagined was overwhelming. I almost had a heart attack because your unexpected silence was like a storm raging through my heart. I didn't know if you were hurt or if something had changed, and the uncertainty was too much to bear. I almost had a heart attack because the thought of losing you to something beyond my control was unbearable. It's as if the universe was playing a cruel joke, and my heart could hardly handle the anxiety. I almost had a heart attack because I saw a glimpse of what life would be like if we weren't together. The sheer dread of living without you left me gasping for breath and holding on to hope. I almost had a heart attack because the enormity of my feelings for you suddenly became undeniable. It was like a tidal wave crashing over me, and I could barely keep myself afloat. I almost had a heart attack because I realized how much I rely on you for my happiness. The thought of navigating life without your presence was more than my heart could handle. I almost had a heart attack because I was confronted with the possibility that you might not feel the same way about me. The fear of rejection and loss was so intense that I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I almost had a heart attack because the idea of not being able to share my life's ups and downs with you was too painful to contemplate. You are my confidant, and losing that would be devastating. I almost had a heart attack because a sudden realization hit me about the depth of my commitment to you. The intensity of my emotions made me feel overwhelmed and on the brink of a meltdown. I almost had a heart attack because I thought I had missed an opportunity to make things right between us. The sheer panic of realizing that I might have lost my chance was almost too much to handle. I almost had a heart attack because the gravity of my own inadequacies and fears became starkly clear. The thought of not being good enough for you filled me with a sense of impending doom. I almost had a heart attack because the vision of a future without you was too bleak to bear. The emotional turmoil of imagining life devoid of your presence left me breathless. I almost had a heart attack because I was overwhelmed by the enormity of the love I feel for you. The realization that my feelings were so deep and profound was both exhilarating and terrifying. I almost had a heart attack because I suddenly feared that I might never be able to fully express how much you mean to me. The anxiety of not being able to convey my love left me in a state of panic. I almost had a heart attack because I was struck by the thought of losing you due to circumstances beyond our control. The sense of helplessness and fear was so intense that it felt like a physical blow. I almost had a heart attack because I was hit with the crushing realization of how important you are to me. The thought of a life without you was too overwhelming to process. I almost had a heart attack because the fear of not being able to make things right between us became overwhelming. The thought of the relationship slipping away was more than I could bear. I almost had a heart attack because the sudden awareness of my own vulnerabilities in this relationship hit me like a freight train. The fear of exposing my weaknesses and being hurt was paralyzing. I almost had a heart attack because I was faced with the possibility of losing you to someone else. The thought of you being taken away was so distressing that my heart raced uncontrollably. I almost had a heart attack because I realized how easily our happiness could be disrupted by unforeseen circumstances. The fear of everything falling apart was a heavy weight on my chest.